Hello everybody. I am in fact now continuing with the introduction to business immorality and corporate social irresponsibility. The previous topic was about habitual lying or automatic lying, and between similarities of this practice and concept in our private lives and in our public lives, in our lives as physical persons and in our lives as parts of legal persons, companies, corporations. Okay. Now we must turn, or we should turn, or we will turn to the specific issue of bribery and corruption. Now, why this issue? Why? Because this is, in a way, this is quite frequent, important, influential method of corporate social irresponsibility. That's it. What I am using are different sources, because I was writing on the topic of bribery and corruption for perhaps a decade now. I have a series of analysis of the concept mostly, and some applications to the practice, and some practical advices how to resolve the problem, if it is the problem. The latest thing I wrote was an entry for an encyclopedia of corporate social responsibility at Springer Verlag, and I will be using this material as well, besides older materials on the topic in question. Now, let me turn to what I'm going to explicate in this remark. I'm going to explicate the concept of bribery and corruption. I will introduce the phenomenon, and then I will turn to a few important issues concerning B and C, bribery, B for bribery and C for corruption. Namely, the first issue will be the criterion of bribery and corruption appropriate for the practice countering it. The second will be types of bribery and corruption, accompanied with few examples. A special section will be of nepotism, and then I will reply. I will make some objections and replies concerning the proposed criterion of bribery and corruption. Finally, I will talk about countering bribery and corruption quite shortly, and I will, of course, introduce some further directions in which listeners of this remark should go if they are interested in pursuing the issue in more detail, or perhaps in some different manner or different direction altogether. Okay, let me start with the concept. Now, bribery and corruption are quite familiar concepts, and they're quite common. All of us, or most of us, are acquainted. Some of us perhaps took a part in it, and this seems to be quite important when one tries to introduce a concept. Now, both concepts are concepts that are opposite to some completely different concepts, or even a set of concepts, or even a pile of concepts. Now, bribery, corruption, and nepotism, etc., similar concepts. Extortion, favoritism, fraud, grease money, paying on the take, paying hush money, etc., payoffs, are all concepts to which the pattern, the opposite pattern, and a series of concepts is settled around the concept of proper functioning. Therefore, if this is the case, bribery and corruption should be understood as improper functioning of something, some X, for instance. Okay, so they are part of improper functioning, something functioning not properly. Another thing that should be mentioned at the beginning is that concepts of bribery and corruption should be analyzed in a pure logical manner, and in a procedural manner and in formal manner. Yet this does not seem to be sufficient, because only such logical or formal or procedural analysis by all means may be necessary. Yet it's insufficient, because we should ask ourselves why we are defining the concept. Because we want to understand it. Why do we want to understand it? Because we think such practices, phenomena and practices accompanied with the phenomena are in fact bad, are irresponsible, and therefore we should in a way counter these practices with something. And when we describe the practice, when we engage perhaps in practice, we are not engaging with concepts. We are not engaging with pure procedural logical structures. We are engaging with other people, with experiences, with procedures, with standard routines, even considering bribery and corruption. Okay. Therefore, even when we are starting to define the concept, the very concept in question, we should try to describe the concept, or even to define it, within a broader social, cultural, administrative, business, perhaps even historical, psychological context. And these contexts should supply us with a reasonable amount of variables, of stories, of I don't know what, which will help us in the following step, when we are going to try to apply this concept in a particular rule or particular procedure, how to counter the very phenomenon of bribery and corruption. Okay. Now, another thing should be mentioned at the beginning as well is that this moment is quite important, because bribery and corruption are like prostitution. You cannot eliminate it. But so far as such phenomena as bribery and corruption exist in a quantity and quality and the dynamics and rhythm and tempo within a given society in a way that this quantity, quality, etc. does not relevantly influence the standard proceedings, standard procedures and functioning of a society. Okay, it's not okay even then, but it does not threaten the whole society, the existence of the whole society. And the idea is to minimize the amount of such actions, to minimize it. This is important, to reduce it to acceptable level, an acceptable level being a level which is such that it does not substantially influence the standard procedures, standard operating procedures and routines and practices in a society, as well as other irresponsibilities, criminal, I don't know what. It's always the same. So why shouldn't it be the case here as well? So when one is, especially politicians, when they're talking about exterminating, I don't know, they use quite vivid expressions when they describe the willingness to fight bribery and corruption. They have zero tolerance to this and that. Okay, this is bullshit, complete bullshit. What we have to do, what one has to have, is the idea that there are irresponsible phenomena that cannot be eliminated from the society. That's it. However, at the same time, they can be reduced to some minimal level, which is such that it doesn't produce relevant, substantial harm, and doesn't influence standard proceedings and standard way of life, Lebensform of a given society. Another introductory note is that bribery and corruption should be also, one should differ between bribery and corruption on national level and on international level. This is one difference. So bribery and corruption may be going on less within a particular nation and society, yet if particular persons, physical or legal, are doing most of their business abroad, on international level, there a lot of bribery and corruption could be going on. Okay. Another variable that should be mentioned is also the variable that bribery and corruption goes on in different layers or spheres or aspects of society. Therefore, bribery and corruption goes on in economic or business layer of a society, then perhaps in cultural level, and legal level, and social, and etc. Okay, and this is important because different systems of influence, systems of power, systems of relations within groups, which are the most influential within these particular levels, horizontally distributed, are functioning differently. Therefore, for instance, bribery and corruption in culture, and bribery corruption in business, and bribery and corruption, say, in law, may seem to be completely different. But they only seem to be completely different due to the fact that they belong to different spheres. Yet the key pattern is always similar, to the pattern in a different layer, quite similar. There are far less dissimilarities than similarities between patterns in different layers of bribery and corruption. Okay. Now, since I'm not inventing anything new, and since I was always writing on the topic which is quite researched and investigated, I always try to start by comparing hundreds of definitions, and the most frequent definition that I found in various entries, papers, articles, books, introductions, etc., sometimes even within books dealing especially with bribery or corruption, or bribery and corruption and nepotism, etc., is the following one. I will read it. Bribery and corruption, therefore, is the abuse of power by a public official for private gain. More than 20,000 internet sources have this definition as the first and the basic one. Now, this is important, perhaps, because perhaps this particular definition of bribery and corruption seems to be corrupted. Seems to be corrupted, conceptually, of course, conceptually corrupted. And I will argue in favor of this opinion. First thing is the objection. First objection will be quite formal, and the objection is such that the very definition, of such definition of a bribery and corruption falls under the paradox of the problem of the criterion, which says that one cannot know the criterion if one doesn't know any particular case, and on the other hand, one cannot know any particular case if one doesn't know the criteria of a phenomenon in question, here of bribery and corruption. This definition is also in terms of classical definition construction quite dubious one, because what is here a specific concept under which corruption is subsumed. It's subsumed under abuse of power. What is abuse of power? This is not the nearest higher notion. Perhaps the nearest higher notion would be, I don't know, some kind of criminal act or some kind, but not abuse of power, because abuse of power is a strange concept. It's quite strange. It's too abstract for bribery and corruption. But it will turn out that it is important to use and to refer to the power, to the notion of power. Now let me turn to the introduction. Now we have at least a preliminary definition. If one wants to introduce the phenomenon of bribery and corruption, one shouldn't start with quite developed societies or quite small societies as opposites. Why? Because one cannot see in such examples, they are good examples of course, but for different practical purposes. Because introducing a phenomenon is a situation in which one needs to describe the phenomenon. One needs to describe the phenomenon, and in order to describe a phenomenon, one needs to describe its dynamics, how phenomenon appears, how it exists, and how it disappears, perhaps, or in this particular case, how we should counter this phenomena if we think that they are irresponsible things. Now, therefore, I will use two descriptions of a phenomenon used in Croatia. The first definition is definition used by Ministry of Internal Affairs, or also known as police. And I think that their description will strike you as important directly. So let me read it. In the most wide sense of the word, corruption is taken to be any form of abuse or misuse of authority/power for personal or group benefit, no matter if it takes place in a private or public sectors. Contrary to that, Croatian Parliament, National Parliament, in its document National Strategy for Corruption Control, or Fighting Corruption, something like that, says the following: therefore, political institution. In the most wide sense of the word, similar, huh? Corruption is any abuse or misuse of public authority/power for private gain. In the narrower sense, corruption is an act of illegal trade between a public official and other person for private gain. It is quite interesting to mention that the first description used by police, Croatian police, is also can be found as quite similar one on the website of Transparency International, while the second description of Croatian National Parliament can be found, quite similar one, can be found on the website of the World Bank. Therefore, what one can conclude so far concerning these descriptions? At least one can conclude that institutions who are dealing with bribery and corruption, countering it on daily basis, use the terms and expressions which allow them to counter it actually, while political institutions and some, at least some, quite influential business institutions on international level are using quite narrow description of the phenomenon. Why is this so? I don't know. I really don't know. Perhaps because it is not the job of World Bank or Croatian Parliament or any parliament to counter the bribery and corruption actually, while it is a job of a police. So this description differs. And so far, I think you've guessed that I prefer the first definition rather than the second one. Now, compared to these two descriptions, I will try to supply the following one, which seems to cover some important theoretical elements, while preserving the openness of the description, and therefore preserving our tendency to find the most suitable practical tools to encounter the phenomena of bribery and corruption. Therefore, the preliminary criterion runs as follows. Corruption, C, abbreviated C, is any group of actions of abuse or misuse of official powers by at least two persons acting as officials or with official powers in order to achieve non-official benefit for all sides included. With some minor corrections, this holds for bribery as well as for a series of types of corruption as well. This criterion has some critical elements which are quite important that are not explicitly stated in the two previously mentioned. First thing, it's important to include two or more persons, two or more sides included. Second, actions of abuse or misuse of official powers. The word official is important because then, as said at the beginning, it is obvious that some standard of particular profession is violated. Therefore, the connection can be made quite easily. This is important. Third, achieving of non-official benefits for all sides included is quite important. This is important. Why two persons? Why is this important? Because it is as simple as that. You have to have two persons, one who corrupts or is willing to corrupt, and the other who is willing to be corrupted. If there is only one of these two sides, then corruption would be impossible. Say, I'm willing to corrupt you, so I'm offering something to you in order for you to make some benefits for me personally, and you are not going to do that. You're completely against that. Say no. So the act of bribery or the act of corruption would be impossible, or vice versa. If you offer me that I bribe you, and I will say, "Oh, this is awful. I would never do such thing. This is crazy completely." Another element is willingness, because if two persons are collaborating, then they are collaborating willingly. They are not forced to do that. And besides the point that two persons are included, and we are often trying to or describing corruption and bribery as something which is done unwillingly. Well, this is not the case. We all of us must want to do that. This is important. And if this wouldn't be the case, then it would be impossible, for instance, to differ between bribery, corruption on one side, and say extortion on the other side. Extortion is unwilling relation, because one extorts from the other, and other is not willing to give something. So therefore, one person is sufficient for extortion, while for corruption and bribery, two sides are needed. This is important for the understanding of the very phenomenon. Okay, these two sides included are also this is some kind of myth, perhaps, that there are people who are willing to corrupt other people always, and on the other hand, there are people who are willing to be corrupted in order to gain some personal benefit. Almost as if there is always a kind of innocent side in a relation. Well, this does not seem to be correct, because nobody is suffering a corruptive act by another person. Neither a person who is corrupting nor the person who has been corrupted in a particular situation. Nobody is suffering anything. All sides are doing this completely willingly, and they wish to do it, and I suppose they know how to do it, and they see the opportunity and seize the opportunity, and that's it. Second element, I'm repeating, actions of abuse or misuse of official powers. Well, this element is also important, as I said, because the word official, again, if there is a situation in which, say, I'm going to corrupt some person, and other person is willing to be corrupted, so we come to some kind of understanding, and we are doing it. Okay, Well, if we are doing it, what is going on is that at least one of us, if not both, are violating some standard procedures of our professions. Therefore, our professionalism is at stake, and this is important. This is important because, for one thing, it is directly clear that something unprofessional is going on. Another important thing is that should be mentioned is that the link, the relation between bribery and corruption on one hand and professionalism on the other is established, and this is important. So it's not something that is going on in some kind of gray area. It is direct, in most cases, direct violation. Okay? So this second part is important because of this. The third element, I'm repeating it again, and achieving non-official benefits. Therefore, here we have a contrast within the description between official and non-official. One is abusing, or both sides are abusing their official powers in order to achieve non-official benefits for themselves, for the company, for the institution, for the society, I don't know, personal benefits by using their professional powers. This is it. So, obvious conclusion is that bribery and corruption include, these two phenomena include non-professional way of acting. All of these ways of acting are kinds of failure to exercise care in terms of ordinary care as negligence, or in terms of extraordinary care as a breach of fiduciary duty or malpractice or similar. However, if we turn this element around, we instantly see that it is necessary yet insufficient element, because it's not every act of non-professional action is not by its definition bribery and corruption. For one thing, one can perform unprofessionally without any producing any benefit toward him or herself or toward the other side. So any kind of incompetence isn't by the definition exterminis isn't bribery and corruption, because what is needed is first thing is the other side is needed that is willing. Another element, they must be in some kind of consensus of what they are going to do, and third thing, they need to produce personal benefits for both sides. This is important. Okay, now the last aspect is the aspect of time. The aspect of time seemed to be quite important, because perhaps time aspect will make quite clear the distinction between bribery and corruption on one hand. So imagine bribery and corruption, and other ways of acting, because these ways of acting are in fact the content of the concept of bribery and corruption. All of these acts are in fact acts done by professionals performing as professionals on their workplaces, and there are ways in which such actions should be performed. We often mention professionalism, job description, right way, the proper functioning, etc., of a system, for instance. Yet there is a similar concept, the concept of administrative action, which is more suitable here because it lightens the concept more clearly. Now, imagine that you have three columns, which are columns that separate time slices, say 3 times, T1, T2, T3, okay? Now, the middle column is in fact right time, let's call it right time. The first column will be too soon column, and the third will be too late. So we have too soon, right time, too late. Now, imagine you have 3 layers. The first layer is non-professional, the second layer is professional, and the third, the last one, is again non-professional. So we have 9 boxes, in fact. The middle box, right time and professional action, is in fact the place, the time in which administrative act should go on. So done by professional in the right time. Right time meaning started at the right time and finished at the right time. And done by professional means that it will be done in a proper manner. Now, if we have this concept of administrative act, now we can relate bribery and corruption to it. The first column, it's too early or too soon. And this is in fact where bribery and corruption is going on. It overlaps in part with administrative act. This is also quite important. But in the most of it is too soon, is before the time of in which administrative action should be done properly. So it's something before that it is legally, for instance, required by any kind of rule. And what is the opposite? What is the third column? What is completely opposite from bribery and corruption? Well, it is opposite only in time. From the moral, from irresponsibility point of view, it's almost identically irresponsible. This is in third column. This is a bureaucratic act. Bureaucratic act being act which is done too late. It's too slow. Opposite to the middle column, opposite to the time and way in which administrative action should be done, and opposite to the bribery and corruption, which are too early, too late, because then one engaging it in bribery and corruption can perhaps create some advantage in relation to others doing the same thing, say in business. So bribery and corruption on one hand and bureaucracy on the other hand are non-administrative ways of behaving, non-administrative way of doing things. And this can be applied and should be applied in all the, as I said at the beginning, all the layers of the phenomena. So business layer, legal layer, cultural, social, etc., to all layers. Never mind if they appear differently due to differences in the contents of these layers of dynamics of the life of culture, of society, of I don't know, legal system, political system, economic system, etc. Now, let me turn to the second central issue, and this is the types of bribery and corruption, and I will use some examples here. First example is the following. If a person betting, a bookie for instance, or some other person pays to a sportsman to lose the game, then we have a case of corruption because non-official benefit is achieved. However, the corruption is not public but private, since it is rarely the case that person betting or a bookie are public servants. This is obvious case of bribery, as a kind of private corruption done by two or more physical persons or individuals. Furthermore, if this is a typical case, then it shows that bribery is just a type of corruption. Yet, not all kinds of bribery are illegal, immoral, or culturally unacceptable. And one needs to proceed with extreme caution. Why? Because from the bribery point of view, there are important, serious, and influential cultural differences. For instance, tipping or giving money under the table, as they say in French, or seems to be okay in some cultures, or bakshish also seems to be okay. It's culturally acceptable by all members of culture. Therefore, it isn't the problem that some minority is using or misusing their official powers, their professionalism, their actions as professionals, as officials, in order to create some private benefit for themselves. All the society is practicing the practice itself of giving bakshish or money under the table. But some similar kinds of bribery should be considered, or are considered, quite immoral. Schmiergeld or greasing money seems to be completely unacceptable, for instance. Let me turn to the second example. If a person is a public official, say a member of a government, and if that person bribes another public official, say a person, say the leader of parliamentary majority, in order to A. slow down the legislation process in order for the third party, say a private businessman, to achieve substantial advantage over its competition in relation to a particular business, or B. if critical and crucial information is sold before the law is made effective, then these are obvious cases of bribery as A. public/private bureaucratization, or as B. public-private corruption. Similar cases are all in which private legal persons are included, in most cases private companies, corporations. Bribery/corruption or public official is banned in some countries. For instance, for foreign public officials in the United States. But bribery and corruption between these create a relevant portion of world amount of bribery and corruption on the world level, global level. So this is important, and this is emphasized in official documents by Transparency International for 2009, 2010. Okay. There are both relations included here: a public official seeking to be bribed, and a private person acting on the behalf of a corporation seeking to bribe. So all the elements are present. We obviously have a case of bribery and or corruption. Now we have another element here. This is perhaps the last important element of the phenomenon, and this is an element of types of persons included in bribery and corruption. So we have at least private persons and public persons. And private persons can act as physical or as legal. And public persons can act as physical persons or as legal persons. So we have all the combinations, all four of them. And these examples will cover all these possible relations. Now let us turn to the fourth example. If a person falsely testifies before the court, and from it the person has certain benefits from the person closely related to the accused person, then this is the case of corruption of the whole criminal justice system. And this is a specific case, but nevertheless it's also a case of corruption. There are other cases, one which is quite debated in literature. If a police officer fabricates the evidence, as discussed, for instance, by Miller in 2011, even in the case where the accused person really performed a criminal act, it is the corruption of the public service and of a particular officer without any direct or obvious benefits for the officer. But this is primarily the case of individual yet public corruption. So this is also corruption. And now we must turn to another set of examples, which are mostly considered to be examples of nepotism as a kind of quite similar yet distinct, special kind of misuse of power. So example number 5. Say a person receives some benefits and do not need to return the favor, at least not directly. Rather say, and indirectly, for instance, to continue with such practice in future. Now, the crucial element here is some kind of special relation between persons involved, namely the familiar relation. If an individual person, private or public, or a person acting on the behalf of an individual person, creates benefits to another person of the same kind only because they are related, then it is a kind of corruption, which is called by the law 2003 nepotism. So, nepotism is a special kind of corruption between relatives, which have the power and they misuse their official power in order to gain benefits for both sides included. Okay. Let us turn to the 6th example. Say that a person gets the job on some job competition only because the person is closely related to the employer. Is this a case of nepotism? Now, if there is another person in the competition which is more fitting for the job than the related person, ceteris paribus, it surely is. Other way around, the related person can be of equal fitting for the job, and in such case some further competition should be conducted. But if the related person is of lesser suitability for the job and gets the job, then it is the obvious case of nepotism. Nepotism is a case of bribery corruption because the employer corrupts the whole business, acts non-professionally, morally, individually, and socially irresponsible, as much to the extent to which the business contributes to the society. There is no, this is important, there is no clear argument which shows that nepotism appears only in sphere of public services and companies. It can, and de facto it appears in private sector as well, no matter if this is connected to other issues. An employer can employ whoever, it doesn't matter. Yet, if a private company relevantly contributes to the justice and status of the whole society, then such procedure should be transparent and fair. And nepotism is obviously misuse of power, and results of nepotism in majority of cases are completely unjust, and they are not fair at all toward others, considering this 6th example of getting the job. Okay. However, perhaps there are exceptions to this rule. Why? Surely there are some jobs in the public, perhaps in the private sector as well, in which professionals needed for the job should be of the highest perhaps integrity as persons and as individuals, because concerning their job they deal with quite important, perhaps crucial information, which is rare, which is important for the core business. And therefore, it is not just about a person acting professionally. It is something additional. A person should be of high integrity. Okay, and sometimes in a private business sector, if a member of a family is sufficiently professional for the job, and if it is a person of integrity, perhaps it's more suitable for the job. I don't know, but how then to apply this on a public sector? We cannot have two criteria for this. Okay, perhaps if we cannot have two criteria, then this is wrong. Okay, I don't know. There are some objections and replies. However, this I will skip because these are not suitable for this kind of remarks. It's too technical. Now I'm turning to the last of these central issues, which is in fact a question of countering bribery and corruption. The criterion of bribery and corruption from the beginning suggests that it should be and can be countered, so a society can fight bribery and corruption, and it's possible. There are tools for reducing the amount of bribery and corruption in whole society and in all of its layers. Okay, so this should be done. This should be done. Some of the methods are suggested by Transparency International documents from 2009. So some methods are different internal controls, different ways of monitoring, external verification. This is very important. Some practices should be encouraged as well, like whistleblowing, for instance. And this is not a moral issue concerning the level of trust in an organization, contrary to the complete devastation of trust if a person whistleblows concerning some act of bribery or corruption or by some other member of institution. Of course not. Generally speaking, this will improve the professionalism in the institution, and the professionalism of the very profession, and the professionalism of these particular persons. Okay, it will be costly, yet in the long run, this will create, surely, it should create important and visible benefits for all sides included. Transparent. It should also be mentioned that some elements which are purely moral should be included. And Transparency International, in its document Business Principles for Countering Bribery, mentions three such moral elements which are not really a criteria. They are if an organization, in fact, or institution, or a business, a company, a corporation encourages such elements, then they, in a very strange way, they contribute to surroundings, to context, to climate in a company, something that cannot be really precisely measured. Yet it can influence particular actions of particular physical persons acting as officials. And these three elements are: first, trust; second, moral integrity; and third, social responsibility. Now, this is it, what I had to say concerning these concepts of bribery and corruption as quite typical ways of corporate social irresponsibility. For further directions, if one wants to investigate this issue in more detail, it should be mentioned that literature is enormous, and only some references are useful in a way that their list of references inside of them is separated in quite important sections. Namely, if one wants to discuss theoretical basis of the corruption, the very phenomenon, the criterion of corruption, bribery and corruption, and therefore particular cases which could support the criterion or can serve as objections to it, and afterwards to apply the criterion toward the practical measures of, say, monitoring, principles of monitoring and practices of monitoring, or internal controls, for instance, then only some references have such sections which are have separated theoretical references, theoretical discussions, and practical discussions. Second thing which is important concerning the literature is that sometimes similar arguments are given in a completely different papers, different research, in different fields even. So similar arguments are supplied in, say, bribery and corruption in business, bribery and corruption in a legal system, and bribery and corruption, say, in politics, in business, and say, I don't know, culture, etc. So these fields should also be deferred because not just because the similar arguments are supplied in quite different even different journals, different publishers. Publisher who is publishing mostly I don't know, literature in law and jurisprudence, and the other publisher who is publishing in business, you know, and if you compare to a series of papers or books, one can find a series of quite similar arguments, and this should be deferred. On the other hand, this is also should be compared, because the practical solutions within one sector of a society, one layer of society, can be sometimes applied in another. So this research should be both, in a way, very technical and concerned with particular layer or sphere of society and particular type of corruption and bribery. And on the other hand, it should take into account the relation of the criterion and particular cases and application to the methods of countering bribery and corruption concerning the other ways of doing it in other spheres. So this is also important. So this is it, and this is my last note concerning fifth remark concerning excuse me, concerning bribery and corruption as quite frequent phenomenon of corporate social irresponsibility. The next topic that I'm going to introduce will be another particular issue, which will concern the question of why are we socially irresponsible? Why are we individually irresponsible? Why are we, generally speaking, irresponsible? Because we create a particular benefit toward ourselves. And why are we doing so? Because we are egoists. And egoism, sometimes as a main motive or reason or argument behind our actions, or the most clear description or explication of what we are really doing, will be discussed in the following month. Thank you.